A new flavor for your ear. Epic Spotlight. Putting the spotlight on positive goings on the real people that have chosen a real path. The who's, the whys, and the hows are being shared and given to you.
And we're back, and we got another one. But before we get going, we got to take care of some housekeeping notes. This episode today is sponsored by Epic Mortgage. Whether you're buying, refinancing, or investing, call Epic today. That's 708-905-5300. That's 708-905-5300. It's your dreams, your goals. Let's plan together. Now on with the show. Today we have Rodney Allen. He is the founder of the Chicago ILLectuals Podcast. This platform is where intellect meets culture, conversation meets authenticity, and success stories rise from the grind. More than just a podcast, Chicago ILLectuals shines as a light on those who've defied the odds, navigating adversity, mastering perseverance, and making their mark in industries ranging from politics to the arts, education to activism, and of course, the hip-hop culture. So we welcome Rodney Allen.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate you being on. You know, what was the moment that sparked the idea of launching Chicago ILLectuals Podcast?
A lot of time on my hands during the pandemic. We had to stay at home order. I'm at home, turn on the television, and much of what you saw were negative depictions of us, right? Our culture, when I say us. And I said to myself, I have this time. Why come out of this pandemic in the same position that I went into it, right? Let me go ahead and tackle some of these things on my bucket list. And so we drew up the framework for the podcast, and I like to think of myself as an aspiring documentarian, right? Just kind of highlighting some of the stories that are untold, right? They're right under our noses. Of people who come from challenging backgrounds, impoverished areas, maybe even trauma in some cases, or, people that had two-parent households, but they erected themselves to prominence, in their respective careers.
Chicago is always kind of portrayed in a negative light. And so, when I hear you talking about your perception of the reality, what does your platform challenge? How do you guys go about challenging that narrative?
Well, first of all, it's important that we tell our own stories, right? For far too long, people outside of our culture has kind of framed our narrative, right? We have other people telling our stories, and many of the stories, such as those that we have on our platform, go untold, right? And so what we decided to do was, just reach out to some of our friends. Myself in particular, I actually started to reach out to some of the young people that I had in my youth program from back in 2008, right? And many of these young people had gone on to do some exceptional things in their careers, right? And they're all around the country. And, they came through our youth program. So I would like to think that we had some form of influence on them, right?
Sure.
And this youth program started as a result of when I looked at my own life and took a really honest assessment of some of the challenges that honestly I was born into. And many young people in our communities, they're born under duress and they're faced with trying to figure it out, right? And that coupled with turning on the television and seeing a limited perspective on their culture is damaging, right? And sure. I just felt like I needed to do my part to bring forth some positive images and put them out to the community. And, one of the other reasons was that youth programming, mental health facilities, and a lot of the social services had been defunded, right? And children children really weren't going to youth programs as they were in the past, right? Lack of funding and, Chicago is just dangerous getting from point A to point B. So I had to figure out a way that I could still impact them based on their strengths, right? And part of their strengths is navigating social media, right?
Right.
They're really good at IT. They're always on some type of social media platform. And so I said, this could be another way of providing a service to the youth and, just people from our culture in general. And so that was the whole premise of Chicago's ILLectuals Podcast.
No, and that's what you do. Speaking of your background, obviously you have a background in policy, mental health, and obviously activism as well. So how do you really approach each and every show? How do you really approach just the podcast in general with that background?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I think about my own life, right, and some of the challenges that I had, first and foremost, my wheelhouse has always kind of been young people, right? Because I know some of the challenges that happen in some of the less fortunate, impoverished, underfunded communities, that house food deserts, healthcare deserts, quality education deserts, right? We need some assistance. And I just feel that assistance needs to come from within, right? So for people like me that's been fortunate enough to overcome some of the challenges that we face in our community, I feel that it would be hypocritical not to give back. And so my approach is always, number one, we want to have like a genuinely realistic, fun approach, right? We want to have fun with it, right? There are serious elements to the interviews, but we're also having fun as we have people give chronologies of their journeys. And we want to emphasize important factors to success, such as always mentorship. Every one of my interviews, I always ask about mentorship because, I mean, you know this, Dante. Anyone amongst us who we view as being successful in our society at large, or specifically within our culture, typically they've had a long list of people that helped them along the way, right?
Sure.
And when a young person is faced with challenges and they don't have any guidance or assistance or nurturing to their personal development, then we see things like the school to prison pipeline, things of that nature, right? And so to answer your question, man, we had this youth program, South Side of Chicago, back in 2008. And that was sort of my community organizing phase, where we reached out to these children, most of which were in high school at the time. They would go to school and tell their friends. We made sure that the parents were involved, because if we're having a positive impact on the children, well, we have to have a positive impact on that entire family, because the children are spending most of their time with their parents, right? And so we have to provide these perspectives to their parents as well. But we use like some of the community elders to fund us. We never got a government dollar. We were able to engage in Black business owners tours, where we would rent a few buses and take the children and their families around to Black-owned businesses in the city of Chicago and allow them to hear the story of the business owner, right? We would take them on college tours where we partner with Urban Prep. Many other facets of the program, right? So eventually what happened was that my cousin and I, who co-founded this youth program together, ended up going to the alderman's office, right? Because we were a homeless organization. And we were 501c3, and we had done exceptional work the entire community had already acknowledged that. By this time, we're about 3 years old. And so we go to the alderman's office, and they're happy with the work that we've done, but they fed us rhetoric regarding, us being a homeless organization, and we're a 501c3 approved organization. And they said that they could get us a facility for $1 because we were tax exempt. Okay. We looked around and 18 months had passed, right? Me, being the fiery guy that I am, I got angry and I decided to go back to school and learn public policy, right? And when I enrolled in school, I went to Northeastern Illinois University for undergrad, and I majored in social work and interdisciplinary studies. And little did I know I would become a McNair Scholar, right? So I ended up becoming a McNair Scholar and, conducting research in undergrad and just engaging in a lot of research conferences and things of that nature. And then I left there and I went to the University of Chicago, where I was in 2 master's programs simultaneously in health administration policy and social services administration, and also serving as the president of the African American Grad School Association. And
you were busy.
I was really busy. I've been busy for years. and so immediately upon graduating from the University of Chicago, I went to Detroit and became the clinical director of the Juvenile Drug Court, right? And basically used the same framework that we use for the youth program here in Chicago, right? So eventually I come back and I began teaching at the same university that was my undergrad. And I've been there ever since, man. While teaching, I was also working with this nonprofit. And I was a clinical therapist for children and adolescents with mental health diagnosis. And what that entailed was really you're engaging in individual therapy with children, but you're also engaging in family systems therapy, right? Because it makes no sense to provide evidence-based practice to the child who has to go into the household where parents are uninformed about the possible change, right, that's associated with this therapy. Also, I would accompany families to schools, man, the IEP meetings, 504 meetings. And many times what you'll find in disadvantaged communities is, these are quality education deserts, healthcare deserts, food deserts. And you go into these IEP meetings and it's like they all but ignore the parents, right? Who legislation says should be a part of this IEP team, right? At every phase of the decision-making process. And what I was finding was that was largely ignored. And I would just make these systems, whether it was a school system or the judicial system, or even sometimes the mental health system, right? The healthcare system. Make them aware of the parents' rights and make the parents aware of their rights, right? And it's a very unique position. It's a very unique position to not acquiesce to the social norms that are taking place in these systems, right? They're looking at me like an educated peer, right? Who should side with them as opposed to advocating for the parent and the family, right? And I never did that. So,
are you using your platform now to advocate some of those expressions, or at least opinions that you had on those situations?
Well, they come up now and then, but that's not the purpose of the podcast. The purpose of the podcast is a bit different in that the framework was established to really afford us, and when I say us, I mean Black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
To tell our own stories, right? Far too often, man, throughout history, we've had others frame our narrative, right? And the negative depictions that are put out, we're not saying that they don't exist. We're saying that that's not the whole story, right? There's more to us than what you see on social media. And so, I feel like this podcast is putting a dent in the perspectives that people outside of our culture may have about us. You know what I mean?
What has been some of the surprising moments or eye-opening just discussions and people that you've had on that you can share?
I'm so happy you asked me that, man. And so couple of stories, man, but the one that stands out to the most is some of the former youth program participants who are now successful adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back full circle and they come onto the platform and they tell stories of how they found their voice while participating in the youth program and how Sierra White is now a business accountant who lives in New York, who's 26 years old, owns 6 properties, owned a Red Mango, and is doing very well for herself, right? Or William Jefferson, who's one of the students that was really close because his family and my mother were tight when they arrived in Chicago from the South, right? So he's the grandson of one of my mother's friends, but now he's an actor who's been on Chicago PD and just a lot of other TV shows, and he's doing really well for himself. Or Torian Knox, whose family came from the Ida B. Wells, and she grew up on the East Side and eventually moved to the suburbs, but she was always like a little genius, right? And now she's a program systems manager in IT in Arizona, right? And her fiance also has a limousine service, right? Mm. So these stories, when they come back and tell these stories and they tell you, hey, I grew up in South Shore, or I came from the projects, or one of my high school buddies, man, Delvin Fuller, who grew up by DuSable High School, 2 blocks from the State Street projects, right? And now he's flying private jets. Wow. He's flown Joe Biden and Beyonce and Taraji P. Henson and Mark Anthony and all of these people, man. He's traveling around the world. And he tells these stories about how he went to a castle in Africa and he was taking pictures and security came out and arrested them and took their cameras and he deleted the photos and they eventually let them go. But these are people that come from very modest backgrounds, right? That we've been able to have some impact on very early in their lives, right? Very early in their lives, and then it comes back full circle. And so those are some of the more impactful stories, but there are many. There are many, right? I mean, yours is one. You were on our platform. You have a tremendous story. And our thing is simply this, Dante. If there are people in the world, in our culture, who has children with aspirations to become a pilot, well, you can watch Chicago ILLectuals Podcast and see a Black pilot. You can see a pilot that looks like you. Or if they have aspirations to become a corporate pharmacist, right, who also has a very unique purse line, right, well, you can watch Chicago ILLectuals Podcast and see what Tammy Monk's process looked like. And on and on and on. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so that's our whole intent, man, is to show that no matter where you start or how you start, consistency is the key. And, if you move based on accurate information, you can be successful in life.
Oh, that's awesome. It reminds me of Charles Barkley. I'm paraphrasing, but he talked about there's not enough examples that are out there relevant that people can see, other than, sports athletes and so on and so on. So, to have platforms like this now, we didn't have this necessarily, in the millennium 2000 or in the 90s or 80s. But now that we have this ability, we got to use these platforms to showcase what people are doing. And to piggyback what you're saying, success is a subjective word.
Yes.
And so I'm just curious, from your estimate, how do you evaluate success? Like, what is success? Especially from, modest background. Is it just, having a job? Is it, buying a first home? I mean, what is success to you?
It's an enhancement of one's personal and professional development, right? Because we're all different. Like you said, it's all subjective. But when I started on 53rd and Calumet with little information about my trajectory or where I was going in life, I had no idea that I would end up where I am today, right?
Of course.
Right? But through my own personal development, I was able to engage in, first, you have to start with personal development, right? But through my own personal development, now I'm able to work on my professional development, right? And the principles that were instilled in me in my household, they work well, but that had to be coupled with something else, right? You have to make informed decisions, things like consistency, being on time, small things, right? Small things. And whatever it is that you aim to do in your life, right, can be achieved, right? So if I have an aim and I achieve that aim, then that could be looked at as my individual success, right? That's based on personal and professional development of the individual.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I wanted to hear your opinion on that. Let's have some fun. I marked you down as a hip hop historian.
Yeah.
So, how do you see the genre influencing social change today? I mean, can you talk about, just, taking it back to the 70s to now? I mean, obviously a 50-year look, but, do you see the same influence? What's your opinion just on the, where we are today in hip hop?
That's such a great question, man. That's such a great question. So, hip hop overall as an industry has become very commercialized, and people outside the origins of the culture has capitalized on it, right? And they've capitalized on it largely to the demise of the people who created it. Because the reason that it was created is very similar to the reason that we started Chicago ILLectuals Podcast, because we know that there are people on the margins of society that need better information, right? They need to see people like them that's doing things that are commendable in their communities, in the country and around the world, right? People are doing commendable things. And, some of those people need to look like them. But what has happened is eventually, as hip hop became a commercialized asset of corporate entities, what happened is the influence that it once had changed, right? Now, those influences still exist in hip hop culture, but you're going to have to search for it. Right? You're not going to hear Mos Def on the radio, right? Too much, right? Or Chuck D, or a Rhapsody. People who are trying to put out positive messages, right? You're not going to hear that too much. You're going to hear the negative depictions, and that's just kind of illuminating some of what I was saying about, allowing other people to tell our stories. Although the artist might write the content, right? It's the corporate entities that approve it, that put it out, right? Or that favor the positive messages over the negative messages, or vice versa, right? And so I would just say, man, that the positive images and the positive messages in hip hop is still there, but we have to do our due diligence. We have to kind of dig to find it. You know what I mean? But that's an art form that can't be boxed in. I mean, you have this album that just came out by Pete Rock and Common, right? Great album. I think this is probably this may arguably be Common's best work.
Wow.
Right? Easily in his top 3. Easily, right? But just the messages within that album, man, is a breath of fresh air, man, in my opinion. And we have some other artists that are doing similar things, but they're not pushed in the mainstream. So you're gonna have to search for it.
Yeah, I don't think I even knew that album came out.
Yeah.
Last album for Common, I remember, was with Kanye West when he was the producer.
Yeah. So back in the day, Pete Rock was with CL Smooth, and it was all about culture. It was all about Soul Brother number 1, Mecca and the Soul Brother, and the Common and Pete Rock project has much of that same vibe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely have to check it out. How can artists, in your opinion, feel like they can push it forward and move it forward, move the message? Because, I just go to music has that subliminal nature to it. It seems like, you remember phrases, you remember words, and, even like, I don't know if you view this as hip hop, but like Jay-Z, 444, that really, there was messages in what he was saying. He was really trying to express some things that were on a different level.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I definitely view Jay-Z as hip hop. I mean, he kind of engulfs the realities of the community that he comes from, and then he kind of grew to where he is now. But how can the artist move the culture forward in a positive way? I think it's all about uniting, owning, and supporting one another, right? We have to come together, man, and pool our resources, even in that industry, even when you talk about hip hop. The positive artists have to pool their resources, come together on their own platforms, produce their own materials. We've seen it happen before. We know that it could be done, right? Why isn't it happening right now? One can only imagine. So.
Well, we get spoiled. I mean, obviously you had, the run with like Jermaine Dupri. You had all these producers, P. Diddy and all that stuff, where they were the ones kind of like the gatekeepers, and then they would put you on. And then, people like, I just think of Chance, right? Local Chance, hey, I'm going to be independent all the way through, and I'm not going to sign just for a lump sum of money. I'm going to just build it my own. And that's way it's always my own.
Yeah, and so that's a great point, man. That's funny. You said Chance. Before I moved to where I am now, I used to live on 65th and Ingleside. Chance has a record called 65th and Ingleside. But imagine in that same vein, and let's just take a look at Chicago artists, right? Imagine if you had a Chance, a Vic Mensa, a Common, a Lupe Fiasco, a No Name, all come together to pool their resources in the same vein that Chance is operating, right?
Yeah.
And they own their masters, and they're putting out their own products, and nobody has control over the messages that they're putting out. It can happen, man. That would have impact. Right. And we're just speaking one region. Right. if it happened all over the country, it could permeate the world, right?
Sure.
But we have to make a beginning, right? And
Yeah, I think about like what you just said when you broke those names down. Sometimes it might be the household that they come from, because I think of Chance, and then I think of Vic Mensa, and that's a little bit different of a background how you start up. So if I'm not pigeonholed to having to have money and need money versus someone that it might be in a social or mid to high level society, because dad had a good job for Chance, and so that leads you up where it's, hey, I don't need to be thirsty off money. That could have been the difference too. So our households where we grow up, really can kind of determine the decisions that are made.
Yes. Yeah, they definitely have an impact. I mean, when you lack so much early in your life, and an opportunity is placed in front of you, and particularly without proper guidance, you're not as prone to collaborate and as open to looking through larger lenses, so to speak, right? And becoming service oriented and using your platform or using your prestige to provide a need to the same community that you might have came from, right? And
Sure.
So not everybody's going to get that. I think you're absolutely right. Those variables matter.
Yeah, no, obviously, getting back to, Chicago ILLectuals, building a podcast, kind of from the ground up, as you started in 2020, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. What has been some of the biggest lessons that you've kind of learned as you've built your platform?
I think the biggest lesson was to block out the outside noise and do it, right? Not everybody's going to believe in you, right? But, maybe they don't believe in themselves. So I don't need to pay attention to that. I need to do what needs to be done, right? If it's on my spirit, it's on my spirit for a reason. And so that's number one. Number two, I would say informed decision making, right? Informed decision making. I need to study and really inform myself of how I want to be recognized by the public. What type of image do I want to put out, right? That's part of the reason that I changed my background, right? And part of the reason that I also changed the last section of our interviews, because our interviews have 4 sections. All of the interviews have 4 sections. It may be different people from different professions, but it's all rooted in those 4 sections in terms of the questions, right? And the final section used to be called Bring Some Weed, I Got a Story to Tell in the beginning, right?
Right.
But as we matured and as I thought more about the real purpose, I said, I don't want to be counterproductive and turn anyone away or turn anybody off, right? Through the imagery or through the messaging, right?
Sure.
Although Bring Some Weed, I Got a Story to Tell is a hip hop quotable, not everybody might have
knows
a
that.
fan of Biggie, right?
Right.
And we have 3 generations of people that's looking at our podcast, right? We have the youth, we have their parents, and even some grandparents, right? And so when you think about that, you may want to take advantage of your ability to restructure some things based on information, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting better with time, right? I mean, just constantly evolving, constantly, just little tweaks. I mean, the premise is still the same, but just little tweaks along the way.
And another thing is, lastly, is committing yourself to being structured and organized, right? From day one, I've always operated with an agenda. From day one, each one of my episodes has an agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has an agenda. It has a framework, which ended up paying off. I looked around, it was 5 years, but it ended up paying off. I'll let you ask your questions and maybe we'll get to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically, as we were wrapping up, I was like, what's next for the podcast, and what new initiatives are you looking to do?
So I guess that's a smooth transition. And so I happen to be in a PhD program right now. And when the university, particularly my cohort, who are not from America, I'm the only American in my cohort, right? So I have a gentleman from India, a young lady from Colombia, and another young lady from Mexico. And all three of these people are brilliant, right? And so they found out about the podcast and they were pushing me. And they were saying that, this could probably be your dissertation, right? And it just so happened that, when you're in a cohort, you're always working together. You're always working on projects together. So we're presently working on, and IRB approved it, Loyola approved it, and we ended up working on this research project that took a data set of 6 women from Chicago's ILLectuals Podcast and conducted research on the interviews, right? This is secondary data because it was already out for public consumption, right? And we conducted, oh my goodness, man. We conducted research on those interviews, man, and we're putting the finishing touches on the proposal to get published as a result of the work that we've done, right? But we have the lit review, the discussions, the methods and the findings, right? Which are, the sections of any research project. And our project is called Opposing Dominant Narratives of African-American Women in the City of Chicago, right? Mm. And so these 6 women that I had already interviewed like years ago, right? Right. And so we went and took this data set and we found that we have 6 African-American women who absolutely oppose the dominant narrative that was rooted in the past of the welfare queen, different baby daddies, all of the negative depictions that we know about in our community that are put out to the general public, man. And what we found in our research is that 6 out of 6 of these women were college educated. 5 out of 6 of these women are homeowners. And the one that wasn't a homeowner, at the time of her interview, she was a senior in college. So she's probably going to be a homeowner eventually as well, right?
Correct.
1 out of the 6 earned between $40,000 and $60,000, and that one was the one who was in college. 2 of them earned between $90,000 and $120,000, and the other 3 earned $120,000 and above. Mm. Right? 4 out of the 6, in addition to their professional careers, are also entrepreneurs. What else did we find? 6 out of the 6 acknowledge their mothers and their support systems as an integral part of their success, right? As they encouraged them to pursue education, and that education led them to their professional careers. And the last thing is 6 out of 6 of them highlight giving back as the one activity that sustains them. Right? And we're about to put this out for publication, brother. This came through the podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
It's a true story. Unbelievable. So that's where we at with it, man.
Well, Rodney, I appreciate you coming on to the show, sharing some insight. It was great. Best of luck. Chicago ILLectuals Podcast. Check it out. You can get it right on YouTube. And I appreciate the opportunity on being on the show. And as always, Rodney, I hope you have an epic day.
Yes, my man.
Peace. Appreciate you.
Peace. The who's, the whys, and the how.